Okay, welcome everyone to this recorded interview for SoftComply. My name is Simon Gatto. I am the CSO here at SoftComply, and today I'm going to be speaking with Matteo Gubellini, who is our Chief Compliance Officer and also our product lead for our document manager tool. As most of you guys are probably aware, all of our customers come from heavily regulated environments, so it was imperative for us as a trust signal to our customers that we get our ISO 27001 certification. It's also a requirement for the Atlassian Partner Program. We want to be a gold or a platinum partner. So obviously this became very important to us. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about our plans for achieving ISO 27001 and of course why we decided to use our own SoftComply GRC solution to do that. Obviously it makes sense. We have a tool built on the Atlassian stack. Matteo is going to give us some information and ideas and thoughts around the challenges and the successes he's had on this road to ISO 27001 so far. So let's go ahead and get started. It's going to be a very casual panel interview with Matteo. He spent a lot of time with it. His background is lengthy. And in fact, actually, Matteo, why don't you just tell us a little bit about your background, how you ended up with SoftComply, and then we can jump into some of the questions.
Okay, so my background is I'm a mechanical engineer, but I transitioned during the years towards more a quality and regulatory role. I spent some time in automotive, aerospace, and then medical devices starting 18 years ago. Product design, project management, design control, and then I drifted more and more towards the more quality side of the processes. And then very randomly, I met our CEO, Marion, and 10 years later, here we are with SoftComply and going for ISO 27001. So I have a lot of experience in standards, regulations, and the practical implementation more than the theory, but mostly around the medtech industry, medical devices, not as much into the IS part of compliance.
Yeah, this is always one of the stories I love about SoftComply, and that it is a number of industry experts in compliance and subject matter expertise that decided there was a problem that needed to be solved, and the Atlassian stack seemed like a great place to build it. All right, we'll jump into some questions around the process and the tools themselves. Obviously, we have our own GRC solution, but there must have been some requirements or prerequisites that you had when you were deciding on which tool or solution that you wanted to use. Obviously, ours was probably an easy or one of the first thoughts, but it also needs to be able to provide the functionality to actually achieve your certification. So what were some of the prerequisites or needs that you had when you started looking at, hey, we need to get the certification, can we use the tools and give us what we need?
There were two aspects that I was interested in automated from purely the part of compliance. Now we are now probably going to talk about CI/CD automation, the pipeline automation, like scanning, vulnerability monitoring, and like that. But in terms of achieving compliance, so I needed a tool to control documentation. So of course, Confluence is there. We already have the Confluence instance. And I needed something that was solid, that had electronic signatures, that allowed me to control the versions of documents, to share them, to show the approvals, the approvers, times, and so on. So yes, our system, our own document manager ticked all the boxes. It is designed for compliance with the medtech sector. So this is definitely more than generic compliant to ISO 27001 requires, but of course, if you put together 27001 in the context of other industry, then of course companies have to comply to both. So there are certain stricter required and come from, for example, for the medtech and so forth, that then they will have to blend with 27001. So this was the part of purely documentation, management of documentation, whatever that documentation is, in the context of 27001. And then there was the big part related to risk management and risk assessment for information security. And although I've been doing risk management for 18 years at least, the way that the risk management is approached for information security is different. And as is my background, mechanical engineering, I'm not a software expert. So I need to learn terminology, I need to learn processes, I need to learn how things were done. Because yes, you can take the standard 27001, 27005 for risk management in information security. I worked in the past for cybersecurity of devices, but it's not the same thing. And I had the luck that we had already, even before thinking that we were going for 27,001 years ago, we started setting up or adding to our risk manager templates and a way to manage risk within the context of information security. So starting from 27,001, I have this Annex A. I need to show the compliance, I need a statement of applicability, traces. So I just started from there, already had everything there. I decided what was applicable to us, what was not applicable to us, and I started building my risk assessment. First, we used Jira assets, so we created our list of assets, hardware assets, software assets, information assets, everything. And then we started doing the risk assessment. We decided to go from an assets-based risk analysis just because it's easier for somebody like me who's not really familiar with starting, for example, from vulnerabilities or threats or something like that. For me, it was much easier to start from assets. At least I knew what they were. And then from then months, and of course, it is a process that is never over. To build it, I found very useful that within the same project, I could do an asset-based risk analysis. And then I felt that there were things that are missing. So I did a smaller risk analysis for process. It was more process-based. Then we're still thinking about whether we want to add something related specifically, starting from the vendors, for example. So there is a lot of flexibility to do it in a way or the other way and to link things together. So of course, having designed our Risk Manager Plus to be able to manage IS risk, then it was an obvious choice.
Makes sense. And actually that helps. So obviously taking advantage of a lot of the built-in Atlassian functionality and overlaying our solution on top of it, because of course Jira and Confluence do provide a great base that you need. So kind of leads into my next question then. So again, obviously we do have a GRC solution, but we know there are a lot of options out there, of course, and some of them, there's external tools. I know Atlassian very heavily supports Vanta. There's a number of other external tools, or even some internal tools within the Atlassian ecosystem. But was there a reason, again, we could have used anything, even though obviously we build this, but we could have used anything. We know of some of our competitors that are using external tools for their own certification because of how it works. But I'm just curious, for when we make our decision about using the tools, was there a specific reason or an advantage that you felt that we had using something that's native to the Atlassian ecosystem?
Yeah, definitely, of course. And it is part of our proposal, our offering, that why do you go somewhere else if you already are in Atlassian? There is a lot that you can do here with native tools or some additional apps. So it would have been unlikely that we would have gone with anything external regardless. Once you are in Atlassian, you really don't want to do it. There may be reasons to do it. There may be some cases, there may be some justification, but then you have an additional system to manage. You need to make sure that the systems start talking to each other. They may or may not, they probably are, but it is a different tool. It is managed in a different way. So you want to try to minimize your tools, even for just compliance itself. This is one of the things that we did. For example, when we did our risk assessment, we figured out that we had information spread through different systems and said, okay, let's get rid of a couple of them, merge everything in a limited number of them. We don't need to use both DigitalOcean, the AWS, Google Cloud. We can just take one or two and manage everything there. So keep everything centralized is definitely a big advantage. And of course, we felt that the tools that we had on Atlassian were sufficient for the job. I'm not incredibly familiar with Vanta. It looks like a much bigger type of tool. And I felt we really didn't need something like that, and I'm not sure about the cost, but it's definitely not going to be for free. It's something that probably handholds you, maybe even too much. Given my background that I've done quality for other industries, you realize that eventually when you get through an audit, and you'll have to be audited for 27,001, you need to demonstrate to the auditor that you know what you're doing, that you know your system, that you can justify why you made some decisions. So maybe systems like Vanta are good to kickstart the process, but then eventually you need to take control of your system. You need to know it inside out. Yes, the system can help you, the system can prompt you, the system can make recommendations, but eventually you need to be in control of the system. You need to know it inside out. Yeah, that's it. So because also we had all our code is in Bitbucket, so everything is in Atlassian. Why should I go somewhere else?
For sure, it makes sense. And definitely, I think there's a difference between sort of the initial certification and then the ongoing piece, because of course we know the regulatory, the certification, the risk management, that's all continuous. It's not a one-time thing that you do to get your certs, then you have to continue your compliance journey. That's good to know. So it makes sense. Platform sprawl is legit for a lot of companies. Obviously, right now, macroeconomics, everybody is trying to do more with less. And we do find a lot of our customers are looking for a way to consolidate their tools, spend less money on external tools. So that makes sense. So kind of leads into my next question as well. Then you come from a compliance background, you're an expert, you've done this for many years. Not everybody, when they start out on their journey of ISO, has the background, the subject matter expertise that you do actually to build these tools. So when you were setting it up and you're starting to build this for SoftComply, how much of the work of the planning that you did was handled or was available within the tools themselves, as far as maybe templates, things that might help people that aren't experts in compliance, but that may be able to use the tool to help educate them or give them something to work with, something that's already available in the tools if they know there's a specific compliance or regulatory compliance that they're trying to work towards. So just something that helped them if they're not experts in the field.
Yes, that's a good point. So I have some experience in an adjacent field. So I had familiarity with risk management, I had familiarity with quality management systems. So I already had my own idea. I wasn't completely green and said, I don't have a clue what I have to do. Especially in terms of the quality management system, I know how to structure a quality management system. So I know that I need a manual, procedures, a policy, which by the way, it's all written in 27001. 27001 is quite good at telling you what you need. But the fact that tools like the risk manager, or especially the tools that live in Jira, is when you want to manage bulk information, when you need to manage a lot of information, and doing it manually, it will just be incredibly time consuming and error prone. So the advantage of using this type of tool, and I tell everybody, look, the easiest way to do risk analysis, take a piece of paper and start writing things. Is it maintainable? Is it reliable? Absolutely not. The next step after is to use Excel. Is it maintainable? Yeah. Is it reliable? No. You start with Jira. It's a longer process to get there, but now I know that every time that I go back there, the system is solid, everything is traced. If I add something, if I change something, everything is still linked, connected, traceable, and I can maintain my compliance. And this is something that you can't do really in Excel. So I say, I'll bite the bullet. It'll take a bit longer at the beginning, but we will get the dividends then in the long run. And we already doing it. We haven't been certified yet, and I know that I have my risk analysis. And if we have a new suppliers or we identify a new risk of vulnerability, whatever, I can just jump in there, add a line or two, do an assessment. The rest of the team knows how to do things. We can go in, give a look at it, make a decision, open tickets, controls, and that's it. So it's already been very useful rather than just an Excel file that sits somewhere in Google Drive and people don't really use it other than myself.
Find people in the basement, as our CEO likes to say, oh, your compliance folks. But no, that makes sense. And also we find with our clients as well, you might start using the tool and you get it set up, and yep, there's some upfront investment and time to learn how to get everything into Jira, start utilizing assets. But then once you've done that for your ISO or your SOC 2, there are all kinds of other risks that companies are having to start to manage as well. Cybersecurity risks, project management risks that a lot of companies don't think about when they're building out large projects, and you got a baseline, you're using it for your certifications in Jira already. It's very easy for them to branch out to other requirements that you have, whether they're mandatory regulated ones or even just ones that are internal. So there's another, I think, reason why pulling it into the Atlassian stack is becoming more and more attractive to people that are already using it. So we've talked a lot about sort of the things that you've set up, the tooling, and you've touched on a few things. We talk about our GRC solution, which is obviously it's made up of some specific apps that you can buy in the Atlassian marketplace. And you mentioned a couple of things. Can you just give us an idea of which tools specifically, if somebody was going to go into the marketplace to look for, okay, what do I need to get? What tools do I actually need to install to set up?
Minimum, you need something that manages documentation in Confluence, something that has electronic signature, and there is a definition of electronic signature, and we use our own document manager, and something that can give you some sort of table view or a higher level view of your risks in Jira. Because Jira, like all databases, you open it line by line, and this is the native behavior. But when you look at the risk, you need to step back and have a kind of a more helicopter view. So you need some sort of table-ish view. You need, of course, to get something customizable because not one size fits all. At the beginning, you may be absolutely fine with what is out of the box, but soon enough, you realize that, you know what, I would like to do things a bit differently. I would like to create my own model. I would like to twist the parameters. I would like to move columns left, explain it in a different way. So you have to think ahead of something that you may not want to customize it right now, but something that you may want to do in the future to make your life easier, because things change. You will build experience in the company, and then you will have your opinion on how to do things. There's not only one right way to be compliant to a standard. There are many different ways, and every company does it in a slightly different way. It is definitely something that eventually you may want some level of customization. So this is the bare minimum. Then there are, of course, many other tools that you may want to get, especially for Jira, something that can manage requirements. If you want to go more granular, something that can manage test cases. And again, and this is the answer from the consultant, it depends. Is the company small? Is the company big? Are you managing very high risk data? Are you managing a lot of them? Or are your data not that important? No personal health information, no personal identifiable information. You're really like a GDPR, yes, but it's very light. So depending on how much you need to become of the level of rigor of the compliance, then of course more rigor means that you need to have more evidence, so you may want to have things more structured. But as I said, as a starting point, something to manage documentation, something to manage risk, because especially 27001, like the medtech sector is very risk adverse and risk focused, but 27001 is, yeah, you need to have a structured documents like that, but it's just managing risk. Coming the vulnerability themselves, so when you get them, often should come with a CVSS value. So there you go. They come to you and that they already have a risk level. So that's the starting point. And then you adjust it depending on your own specific situation. If this vulnerability is something that affects you, is it part of a module that you use or you don't use, things like that. But it's straight risk management.
Absolutely. And the marketplace gives us a rich area where we can, if there is additional functionality, obviously you build your baseline and you might find as it grows and evolves that you need to add things. If you have a specific PDF export requirements, like you said, there's K15T. We've also got some integration now with X-ray for testing. Just again, things, again, you don't want to have to continue to add additional products, but in the ecosystem, you have options where you don't have to look for an entirely new product. You can add to whatever you've built. So and we see this happen a lot. Obviously, they start with our GRC solution, and it tends to evolve as more people start to pick it up, as more areas of the company start to use it, again, for different types of risk management or document management. So pretty common to see this, but definitely, I think establishing that baseline of tools makes a lot of sense. Obviously, you had a plan in mind, you've got a lot of experience, but when you're first starting to, so you've got your plan in place, okay, the tools will give us what we need. We have a general idea of what you need to do. What were some of the biggest challenges that you found once you get started with this process? So you've got tools, you know what they do. You've got a general idea of what you need. You mentioned you haven't gone through the process before, but just what were some of the big challenges or things you ran into? Maybe when you first started out, you're like, whoa, maybe you hadn't thought about that, or you didn't have the experience at doing it. You've kicked it off. Now you're like, all right, some challenges I need to overcome to get things going.
Yes. And again, this brought me back 18 years when I started reading 27001. Like when I first read 13485, which is something equivalent for medical devices. You read through it and say, yeah, sure, makes sense. Sure, why not? But then what does it mean in practice? How do you implement that? Especially with a non-technical background like me, what does this mean? How do I interpret that? And here you do the best you can. Of course, if you're a large corporation, you have money to throw to consultants and they would pretty much do it for you. But otherwise, okay, 27001 said, okay, then I need 27002 because 27002 explains you exactly what this means in all these controls, because the controls says data leak prevention. Yeah, okay, sure. don't send stuff around that you should. There is more, of course, to that. So that was steep. That was steep. And then after 27002, I went to 27001 to have a look at the risk management, although that was a bit easier for me. And then it's not difficult to find around information related on how to interpret 27001. And even without going to AIs, there are examples of procedures. There are things that you can gather, even asking other companies that you may know, say, hey, how did you do that? What do you think about that? So it was steep to understand what exactly it meant, and we're still going through that. And yes, even AI had its place in all of this. So once I knew exactly what I wanted, I had an idea on how to write this procedure, and I wrote my own procedure. Then I asked ChatGPT to do the same, and then I started cross-references. Again, don't let the AI just do everything. Think, maybe use different models, cross-check, and say, okay, I like this, I don't like that, this looks better. And then maybe I found very useful to say, hey, give me or some specific guidance about how to implement this clause or this control within the Atlassian ecosystem, considering that we develop apps for Atlassian, or we use Atlassian, and ChatGPT can pick it up and say, okay, then you can go into here, you should do these settings and stuff like that. So, but it is a process. And it is a process that takes time, and it is a process that is recursive, because I'm sure that when we are going to go to the first internal audit, I realize that I have gaps. Then we're going to the stage 1 audit, more gaps, stage 2 audits, more gaps, a year after, gaps. So it's always like that. So you need to put yourself in a position to say, okay, I have sufficient confidence to say we have a good chance of getting certification. And then there will always be something. And this is, again, in general for every company. Once you get the certificate, you need to maintain it. It's like having in a 1-star Michelin or 2, 3, or whatever. Then you have to maintain. It's not that once you get it, then that's it. They keep on checking you. They keep on making sure that you maintain the level. It's not like getting a driving license. Then you get in there, boom, job done. Off I go for the rest of my life. So then the process of maintenance is maybe less time consuming, but it needs more rigor. You need to force yourself, okay, I need to review these things after a month. I can't just leave it there. Let's give another look at it. Spend an hour, half an hour on this thing, and let's review it. Let's give another look at the risk management. Did we change tool? Did we change suppliers? You need to stick to the process, and it takes some will.
Yeah, actually, that answered one of the later questions that I had as well, is that it's not just a matter of setting things up, getting your certification, and then saying, yeah, I got my certification and moving on. It's an ongoing process. Obviously, you always say the GRC solution, it's a continuous process. You'll continually evolve. It's not just I've got my certification and everything's great. This is another reason why people need to think about how it's going to continue to work after you've got your certification, whether it's monthly, quarterly checks. Again, another reason why it becomes so important to have your GRC system built in a tool where people are working already, rather than something you have to come back to every year at audit time. So absolutely, I think having it in there. So it sounds like, to sum up, the answer to your question was learn as much as you can up front, do as much as you can to prepare, get the right tools in place, but then be prepared to also evolve the process as you get it set up. Obviously, the initial aim and the goal is to get your certification, whether it's ISO or SOC 2. But after that, think about how can you improve? What else can you add? Was there anything that you missed? Obviously, and you'll find out after your first audit, probably. So, question, and we talked a lot about the different sort of aspects and different things you had to learn and pieces that you had to figure out. I'm just curious if there's anything in the tool stack that you actually started using. You mentioned there's Risk Manager Plus, there's the document management piece. I'm just curious if there's anything in there that sort of helped eliminate some of the upfront work. You touched on AI. So obviously you can't rely on AI for everything, but a lot of people are thinking like, why don't I just build a Rovo agent? Why don't I just build something in Rovo and it'll just do this all for me?
Which I did.
For sure. So I'm curious too, like which of the tools that you've selected, did it help you reach some of the goals that you had set more easily because the tools provided you with, whether it was embedded requirements or whether there were procedures or SOPs built into the tools, anything that might have made it easier than just building it from scratch with AI or trying to build it from scratch in Jira with nothing else to use?
Yeah, of course, having electronic signature, if you can't develop it yourself, having a risk management tool that gives you a table view is definitely very precious. The fact that our tool has already the Annex A built into it is great. The fact that I started using Jira Assets, thing I had never used before. And so I could connect everything, connect this to the risk to requirements to whatever, everything else that I wanted. This was incredibly useful. And yes, I built a Rovo agent, and the jury's still out in terms of how good that thing is. I built a Rovo agent to check my work. I didn't build an agent that does. I built an agent that checks. So I say, hey, I have this procedure, and this procedure should be complying with this part of the annex. What do you think? Find some gaps. Don't give me strength. I just want to see the weaknesses and the gaps. And I said, oh, okay. And I said, okay, it has a point. Or you always have to be critical. Say, yeah, okay, no, look, we're way too small for what you're suggesting here. Fine. But yeah, I have a few agents that help with this. Small things, and I know it's not the human, but it's a different pair of eyes that checks my work. And I don't have to go to a colleague or somebody else to say, hey, spend a couple of hours looking at that. I fire the Rovo agent and see what he says.
Well, and you raise a good point too. So obviously, when it comes to AI and regulatory compliance, there are places where you can use it, and there's places where you should not be using it. So it sounds like you found some areas where it's like absolutely double checking work, things like that. When it comes to actually human decisions, of course, those still have to be made by a human, which our tools allow you to do. But again, it's not that you can't use AI for certain things. It depends on what you're using it for. Definitely, the AI Rovo has added an interesting twist. I think now it's how do they live together, being able to use AI to speed up your work or use it to double check. But at the end of the day, your risk management, and that has to still be decided on by a human. That's really helpful. So I think finding the right stack, figuring out what you needed to do, getting a baseline of tools to start building out and getting you on your way to your certs, thinking about beyond your certification, how you're going to continue to maintain that system. Obviously, it's not a one-time thing, it's an all-time thing. But beyond that, so it sounds like you get, and of course, being able to evolve it. So there are other things you can then add to it when you decide you need better testing, things that you can add from the ecosystem without having to, again, go to an external platform. So I guess the last question, and maybe the most important question for anyone that's watching this video and thinking about, like, I'm trying to get my certification, I need a tool that I can use. I'm in the Atlassian ecosystem. Would you have any advice for, particularly for our Atlassian partner colleagues that are looking at this because they need it for their own program requirements? Is there any advice you would give when they're just starting out? If you could go back and start over again and do it the right way, is there anything that you would give partners right now that you could tell them, like, if you're going to do one thing, do this thing?
Start earlier, never too early. It's never too early. And that would be the first one and the main one. The other thing is that we got some help ourselves. We had a connection that helped us to say, hey, this is a procedure that explains how to do this thing. And eventually I ended up rewriting most of them because you need to do it your way. And so the fact that you just get a procedure and you copy it and it works for you, it's not really true. You either get the full system, which of course nobody will give you a full 27001 quality system that works together, or you really need to write it down yourself, thinking about, which takes time. You do it and then you realize that it was wrong and you do it again. I don't know how many times I changed a certain procedure, written, then wiped, and then rewritten and wiped it again, and then ChatGPT, tell me what is, okay, maybe I should change that. Start early, try to do it as much as possible. Yeah, get some help, get support, but the worst thing for everybody is just to have to look at a procedure. Oh, this is what we have to do. Why? Can we skip this step? Not sure. So no. Why are we doing it?
Think about the end result. I think, and one thing you mentioned to me in the past as well is start the process from what would the auditors be looking for, and then work backwards from there. Not everybody knows there's resources for that, but I think at the end of the day, someone's going to come in and look at all this and have that in mind as you're documenting the process. And I agree, having worked through some of this with you, starting early is definitely good advice because you'll need time. But once you have it set up, once it's working, once you've added and implemented the tools, this is, I think, where the value really kicks in with using the Atlassian tools, because your teams are in there every day already. The system is in place. Things continue to roll. You've already got everything set up. It's obviously after that front end investment, it becomes part of their day-to-day work. Everybody's involved, just not your compliance people in the basement, which makes it part of their everyday activity, which I think in the end, and we've had the same feedback from customers, when you come to an audit, It's not something that's snuck up on you that you're doing once a year. You've been doing it every day. The Jira work items are in there for your risks, and your documentation has evolved. The tools really allow you to have that continuous sort of process ongoing throughout the year, not just at audit time. That's all the questions that I had, Matteo. This is really helpful. Hopefully this will be a benefit and an asset to any other partners out there, or even customers that are looking, but particularly obviously our colleagues that are in a point where they're thinking about their own certifications, thinking about their own program requirements for Atlassian, and are looking at a tool or something that they can bring in that's going to be affordable, that's going to allow them to maybe minimize some of the platforms that they're running on, and hopefully they will consider using this. For anybody that is interested, definitely drop a note to SoftComply. We will put some additional links and some contact information in the details for this video. I really appreciate the time, Matteo, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks. You too.